Alright, move over Richard Burns' video because this is going to be the hardest one I've ever done. So, like I said in the community post I put up on Saturday evening and then on Discord, I was going to hold off doing a story time on Murray because I don't want to just jump on something for the cheap views just because someone died. And you'll notice that I haven't done a video on Sterling Moss, haven't done one on China Whiting, haven't done one on Nicky Lauder, and well, Lauder and Whiting have been gone nearly 2 years. Moss has been gone over 12 months now. Murray was, at least for me, part of the reason I got into watching motorsport and why I have an interest in broadcasting, production, and admittedly I went into audio engineering. Also got that interest in storytelling and obviously racing as a whole. I want to try to avoid scripting all of this because it would just result in standard issue. Wasn't he great? But when the news of his passing on Saturday came through, it was pretty personal. It was like a relative had died. I mean, I could script the whole thing and think it through, but unscripted is probably better at this point. So I first met Murray in 1994, but I really didn't get to know him until 1996 because that's when I started properly watching Formula One, where all of my first Formula One memories properly have come, even though I actually started watching Formula One the day Senna was killed. And I say get to know him as well in that sense because it really was like having a really enthusiastic relative over for dinner. It was like that third granddad you never knew you had. Now, if you're not aware of customs on this tiny island, it's traditional on a Sunday for families to eat a roast dinner. So chicken, or roast chicken, roast pork, roast beef if you're posh, with roast potatoes, mash, veg, and then have the whole thing absolutely pissing with gravy. Yeah, sophistication. And at that time, most of the Formula One races were in Europe. Yeah, you'd have the first three, like in 1996, the first three were Australia, Brazil, and Argentina. And then with the exception of Canada in the middle of the season, and then later Japan, Malaysia in like 1999, 2000, and so on, the rest of the season was on the continent. And because the races were typically an hour ahead of UK time, they'd be on while we were eating our Sunday dinner. So we'd have the telly on in the living room with just the audio because we couldn't actually see what we were doing or see what we were watching. I mean, I could just about see if we turned it just so. But you'd have Murray's voice on, you'd have the engines in the background and stuff like that, and Murray describing what was going on while we ate. And even now, while watching some of those older races, I could smell those dinners. And that's crazy when you can associate the smell of my mum's roast dinners with old Formula One footage. It's something going on up here, isn't it? I mean, you can associate the smells of that dinner, but you can also, I mean, talking about it now, I can hear those old races in my head. You got those V10 engines, or V12s or V8s as they were from 1995-ish or so. But then you had that voice cutting through over the top. And unless you've been living under a rock, Murray had a distinctive voice. But the important thing was that voice worked. And he started broadcasting in, 1949, where everything appeared to be stuck in the mid-range. And I'm not sure if it was the microphones at the time, or if people were told to talk in that way because it came through better. But how do you describe it? That Glenn Quagmire nasally 1940s radio. On brand spark plugs, the only spark plugs for you. And you're listening to the BBC Wireless Service. The time is 4 o'clock, and now the news. You know where I'm coming from with this, right? And like I say, whether that was because microphones were way hotter on the mids or speakers were just terrible and that's the way it came out, but it's the sound. And it's something I parodied at the beginning of the Ferrari special relationship with the FIA storytime video that I did, that a lot of people took that joke rather seriously. But that cutting voice spoken with such enthusiasm fit with the engine sounds of that era. But it didn't matter whether it was the Formula One on the BBC and ITV, or when he did the touring cars on Grandstand, or the motorbikes, which was his first passion. That voice hooked you in, no matter how dull the race was. And I guess that's why a lot of people go on about how exciting the races were back then and how it was better than today. It had proper racing and it was so close and real talented drivers and stuff like that. But I think it was actually Murray's voice cranked to 11 that made everything sound better, similar to how people will say a Morgan Freeman sat-nav will make your journey less stressful, or Stephen Fry reading the phone book would teach you something. And that was the thing about Murray's voice. You could probably do a Morgan Freeman impression. You could probably do a Bill Clinton impression, an impression of Boris Johnson or whoever it may be. But we all tried to imitate Murray, and all of us failed. Pushing trolleys round the Tesco in Boston going, and here comes Damon Hill into the frozen food aisle. He's looking for the chips and stuff like that. You see, I can't do it. Nobody can. And Murray knew how golden his voice was, but unlike some commentators out there or radio personalities that you may have in your country, I know there's a lot over here, Murray wasn't one of those broadcasters that kept talking because he loved the sound of his own voice, and he kept talking because, oh, it's the Murray Walker show, and James Hunt, Jonathan Palmer, and Martin Brundle are just like the sideshows here. He kept talking because he was so invested in what he was doing and wanted the audience to know exactly what was going on. It was just pure, I'm going to swear here, pure passion. So much so that when he was partnered with James Hunt, the BBC didn't actually cover each race live because it wasn't in the budget, and Formula One wasn't really the multi-billion-dollar thing that it is today. So Murray would drive from his house in Bournemouth up to the BBC's HQ in Shepherd's Bush. James would probably get the tube or just walk from Fulham to Shepherd's Bush, and they would commentate on the race as if they were actually there. And Murray's trying to create this illusion that, oh, it's very hot today, and the weather was absolutely lovely when we drove from the hotel to the circuit. And then James Hunt decided he was going to break kayfabe and go, Murray, we're in London. What the actual fuck are you on about? But I was too young for that partnership because I was born in 1990 and James died in 1993. So I associate Murray Walker with Martin Brundle in the same way that I associate Lindsey Buckingham with Fleetwood Mac, and my dad associates Peter Green with Fleetwood Mac. But we'll get to that more in a bit, as weird as that sounds. And because Martin had a more recent experience with Formula One, Murray relied on him to have the more technical know-how with what was going on, way more than what James Hunt or Jonathan Palmer could, because they'd been out of the sport for a long time when they started doing the broadcasting. And that, in a way, helped Brundle become this respected pundit and commentator that he is in his own right today. And then you would get points in a race where it sounded like a grown-up son looking after his dad because he's going a bit mental. It was something that they brought up on the tribute on Sky Sports the other day. So Murray would say something, and then Martin would say, like, actually, Murray, I think it might actually be. And then Murray would be like, yes, you are correct, Martin. That's actually Heinz-Harald Frentzen that's gone off. And then he'd back off, and he's just, the freight train's left the station without the driver again. And that's where his mistake, well, they weren't mistakes really, because in his own words, they were prophecies that turned out to be immediately wrong or something along those lines. But those mistakes became known as Murrayisms over here. And in America, I think they're called Coleman balls after a baseball commentator. And that in itself is my favourite section of Private Eye magazine, where people send in gaffes made by TV presenters. But these gaffes endeared Murray to an entire nation. But that in itself isn't strictly true, because Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, like all the English-speaking countries except the United States, as far as I'm aware, got Murray and Martin. And because it was the Commonwealth that got the ITV broadcast or BBC broadcast or whatever it was, the whole Commonwealth knew who he was. And such gaffes include, there's nothing wrong with that car except for the fact it's on fire. Jenson Button is in the top 10, he's in 11th, and that car is unique except for the one behind it, which is exactly the same. But it wasn't just the gaffes, because occasionally he'd have a reaction to something that was just gold, that would make highlight reels for eternity, like Gabriele Tarquini rolling his Alpha at Knockhill to the screams of, oh, off! That's Tarquini! How did that happen? And the infamous, he's now in behind Steve Soper, I'm going for first, says John Cleland. Which is just my favourite thing in the world, because he's just like, he's John Cleland's done something he shouldn't have done at 2:15 in the afternoon on a Sunday. Let's cover that. Yeah, I'm going for first. And then there's Mansell's blowout at Adelaide, Schumacher hitting Coulthard at Spa. It's happened immediately at Suzuka 1990, and the iconic, I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat. And speaking of that moment, yes, there were times he could be a raging Damon fanboy, but he had biases towards Schumacher and Senna as well, but it was more because he appreciated their brilliance and would be the first to call them out if they did something a bit iffy. And then in the case of Damon, it was actually personal, because Murray had known and commentated on Graham Hill when he was racing. And in a way, I didn't think about this until I started to sit down and try and put this together. Murray influenced my music taste as well, because as many of you will know, the theme tune to the BBC's coverage of Formula 1 is The Chain by Fleetwood Mac, specifically the outro of The Chain. It's got words and stuff. Not many people actually realise that. And because of me watching Murray on television and trying to be Murray on occasions, and because of that theme tune, my dad bought Rumours on cassette. Remember those? And we'd have it on in the car when we went on like shopping trips to Peterborough, or when we made the 2-hour drive from Holbeach, which is a small market town on the east coast of England, to where my grandparents live in Birmingham. But one of them still lives in Birmingham, the only surviving one. But yeah, it's a 10-minute drive from where I live now, I guess. Yeah, all of that aside, we had time to burn in the car, so why not stick a cassette tape on? So we'd be driving in my dad's Sierra, getting through songs like Secondhand News, Don't Stop, Dreams, Go Your Own Way, Never Going Back Again, until you get to this really dark sounding song played on an acoustic. The Chain. Verse, chorus, breakdown. Doom, do-do-doom, do-do-do-do-doom, doom. Needless to say, when John McVie's bass riff started up, my eyes were like... And the next thing you know, you're shouting Murray Walker quotes, making Murray Walker noises, and going... Stuff like that, really. So fast forward to 2012, and my girlfriend, now wife, buys me the 35th anniversary edition of Rumours as a Valentine's Day gift. It was just after Mick Fleetwood was the guest on Top Gear in the reasonably priced car segment. And we went for a day trip to the Black Country Museum, and I thought, I'll just pop the CD on, and just like memories and stuff like that. And it went through the songs that I described earlier, and then The Chain started. And she'd never heard it in its entirety before, and you know, she's a Formula 1 fan as well, but she'd never heard The Chain as a whole song before. And then the breakdown started, and I said, previously on Formula 1, like Idris Elba used to do at the time. And then I went, round 6, Silverstone, as the doom hit. And she had the exact same reaction I did back in 1995, 1996. So in a way, because of Murray keeping me hooked into what was happening in Formula 1, I'm a Fleetwood Mac fan. And from there, discovered the Eagles, other classic rock bands, and because of all that, it's probably why I'm such a John Mayer fan today. But as a whole, for motorsport fans my age, Murray was the sound of our childhoods. And my mate Chaz Draycott got into broadcasting and commentary because of Murray. He's doing it professionally now because of Murray. And I'm sure Lewis McGlade, who I do a lot of esports broadcasts with, got into it because of Murray, and I'm fairly certain Jack Nicholls was exactly the same. Yeah, we're the younger guys here. We're in our late 20s, early 30s. We're not Alan Hyde. We're not David Croft. We're not Ben Edwards. We're not any of those guys. We're kids by comparison. And I commentate as a hobby because of Murray. If I ended up making half a living from it, it'll be because of Murray. And he had one of those easily recognisable from 20 miles away voices like Patrick Stewart, Morgan Freeman, Larry King or Terry Wogan. And with John Motson and Jonathan Pearce on the football, Clive Everton on the snooker and Richie Benno on the cricket, Murray was not just one of the most popular and instantly recognisable voices in British sports broadcasting, but international sports broadcasting. Which isn't bad for a bloke from Birmingham who wrote advertising slogans and said that was his job instead. And it is regrettable that he never became Sir Murray Walker, but then again, this is Murray. He was probably offered one but declined it, which, given what many have said about him in the last 5 days, sounds about right, really, doesn't it? Humble. And to paraphrase Marty Reid, Why do we always say until next time? And that's because goodbye is always so final. So with that, goodbye, Murray Walker. And now it's me that has to stop because I'm the one with the lump in my throat. So until next time. Yeah, until next time.